My wife had an affair with my cousin, and they had a child together. My entire family knew but kept it hidden from me for years. Now, after I've finally found stability and success, they want to reconnect. I ask for your patience as I share everything. Because this is more than just betrayal. It's decades of silence, pain, and shocking revelations. I'm a 44-year-old man currently in a happy marriage of 10 years. My wife, who is 41, and I have been together for 13 years, and we share a wonderful 8-year-old son. However, this isn't my first marriage. Back when I was 22, I married someone I'd loved since middle school. Let's call her Amy. We were young, passionate, and believed we were soulmates. As soon as we graduated college and settled into decent jobs, we tied the knot. For a while, things seemed perfect. But not long before our third anniversary, everything began to change. Amy grew distant. I tried to keep the relationship alive, but she seemed checked out emotionally. Then, out of nowhere, she handed me divorce papers. She said she no longer loved me. That was her only explanation. Despite my efforts to save our marriage, it was over. I was angry, hurt, and confused. But I didn't fight the divorce. We had very few shared assets, and I didn't want to prolong the pain. Once it was finalized, Amy disappeared, changed cities, and cut off all communication. What hit even harder was that my own family suddenly stopped talking to me. Around the same time the marriage ended, my parents and even my sister blocked me out completely. I didn't understand why. I reached out. I even visited them. But no one would answer the door. Already reeling from the divorce, this complete shutdown devastated me. I quit my job, sank into depression, and stayed unemployed for months. The only people who stood by me were my friends. They supported me through it all. Eventually, with their encouragement, I decided to chase a long-held dream, opening my own restaurant. Amy had never been supportive of that ambition, so after the divorce, I had nothing holding me back. I even used the name my parents once suggested for the restaurant, a painful but symbolic decision. With help from my friends and a few investors, I brought my vision to life. For years after the divorce, the restaurant opened. 2 years after that, I met the woman who's now my wife. We connected at an event. She was a fan of my restaurant. After 3 years of dating, we got married. Now, 10 years later, we have a child, and my business has grown beyond what I ever imagined. I'm now the CEO of a successful hospitality group with a chain of restaurants and hotels. Things were finally going well. Until a single TV interview reopened a wound I didn't even know was still festering. Recently, I agreed to do a televised interview about my business journey. I took it as a sign that I had finally made it. What I didn't expect was for that interview to trigger a chain of events I wasn't remotely prepared for. 3 days ago, my receptionist called my office and said, "Your family is here to see you." My first thought was that she meant my wife and son, but they were both busy, so that didn't make sense. Then she clarified, "Your parents and sister are here." I froze. It had been over 2 decades since I'd last seen any of them. And now, out of nowhere, they were in my lobby. I told the receptionist to kindly ask them to leave. I was in the middle of work. But they refused. They made a scene. I didn't want security to intervene, so I reluctantly walked out to the lobby. There they were. As if no time had passed. They immediately started acting like nothing had changed. Smiling, complimenting me, saying how proud they were, congratulating me for my achievements, telling me how inspiring my story was, as if they had any part in it. Then they said something that made my stomach turn. They wanted to meet my wife and son. "Your family," they called them. They spoke as though we'd just fallen out of touch for a few months, not vanished from each other's lives for over 20 years. And then, to my disbelief, they blamed me, claimed I hadn't tried hard enough to stay in contact after the divorce. I knew then that I couldn't let them walk away this time without answers. So, instead of sending them off, I asked them to sit down. And that's when the truth came out. Sitting there in the lobby, hearing them finally speak after 2 decades of silence, I felt like I was listening to someone else's life unravel. They told me what really happened back then. Amy, my ex-wife, the one who left me without warning, had been cheating on me. And not just with anyone. She was having an affair with my cousin. Let's call him Carl. Even worse. My family knew. They helped her keep it hidden. At the time, I had no idea. I thought Amy had just fallen out of love. But now I was hearing that she had betrayed me with a relative, and my parents had actively covered it up. They tried to justify it. Said they had reasons. Carl, apparently, had always been the golden child. His mother died when he was a baby, and ever since then, the family treated him like he was fragile, untouchable, spoiled. entitled. On top of that, his father, my uncle, was the founder of the family business. My dad worked under him. So when Carl decided he wanted Amy, and she agreed, my family felt pressure to go along with it. They didn't want to upset my uncle. To them, it was easier to cut me off than to cross Carl's father. They chose their loyalty, and it wasn't to me. Worse still, I learned that Amy was already pregnant when she served me those divorce papers. She never told me. My parents never told me. She had the baby, and that child grew up believing Carl was her father. They all made that decision, without me. I sat there stunned, trying to make sense of everything. My parents had kept this massive secret from me for 2 decades. I had a daughter I never knew existed. And the worst part? They acted like they were doing the right thing. They claimed they objected at first, but when Amy threatened to cut them off from seeing the baby, they gave in. My uncle made it very clear. If they wanted to be involved in their grandchild's life, they had to sever ties with me. And so they did. Quietly. Without a word. Without even giving me a chance. Amy moved out before her pregnancy began to show, so I had no idea. There were no warning signs, no clue that she was carrying a child. And when she vanished after the divorce, so did my chance of ever knowing the truth. That child, my daughter, is now nearly 20 years old. She grew up believing Carl was her biological father. She's never even heard my name. I sat in that lobby, staring at the people I once called family, and realized they had rewritten my entire life story without me. They said it was to protect the family, but it was really about avoiding conflict, about staying in Carl's and my uncle's good graces. And now, after 20 years of absence, they were here because they saw me on television. I told them to leave. I stayed calm, professional. I didn't want to cause a scene in my own business. But the moment they finished talking, I made it clear that I didn't forgive them. Not now. Maybe not ever. Of course, they didn't take it well. My parents and sister began pleading with me to see their side, insisting the situation had been complicated for them too. They claimed they never stopped caring about me, that they were forced into silence. But I wasn't buying it. I told them, point blank, that I believed they were only reaching out now because they saw I was successful. I didn't exist to them when I was struggling, but now that I was running a growing hospitality company, suddenly they had the time and energy to show up. They denied it, of course. My sister even had the nerve to say that without them, I wouldn't be where I am today, because they had once helped come up with the name for my first restaurant. I laughed. A name? That was their grand claim to my success. They weren't there when I was broke. They weren't there when I was depressed. They weren't there when I was building from the ground up with nothing but a dream and the support of my real friends. I told them I had no interest in continuing the conversation and that if they refused to leave, I'd have them removed. They stood their ground, still trying to argue, until I had security escort them out of the building. Even as they were being led away, they kept talking, pleading, justifying, apologizing. But I didn't feel sorry for them. Not anymore. They made their choice 20 years ago. They lived with it just fine. Now they can keep living with the consequences. Even after being escorted out, they didn't stop. For the next few days, they camped outside my workplace. They sent long, emotional emails. They messaged me from different social media accounts, all filled with apologies and pleas for another chance. But I ignored every single one of them. They didn't deserve my attention. I had gone 2 decades without them. I could go 20 more. Their apologies felt hollow. They were only sorry now because their secrets had surfaced, not because they genuinely regretted the pain they caused me. Despite everything, I found myself caught in a different dilemma, one that had nothing to do with my parents or sister. My daughter. Until just days ago, I didn't even know she existed. Now, I couldn't stop thinking about her. What she was like. What kind of life she'd had. Whether she even knew about me. My wife and I talked about it for hours. She's been incredibly supportive through all of this. We both agreed. We needed to be cautious, but we couldn't ignore the fact that there was a young woman out there who was my biological child. During my parents' visit, they had told me which college she attended. Using that info, my assistant helped find her social media, her name, her photos, her life. And then came the biggest question of all. Should I reach out? Should I disrupt her world with a truth she might not be ready for? For days, I wrestled with what to do. Part of me felt like I had no right to interfere. After all, she had grown up believing Carl was her father. But another part of me, the part that had just been blindsided by decades of deception, couldn't let it go. She was my daughter. I missed out on her entire childhood without even knowing she existed. My wife encouraged me not to wait too long. She said that dragging it out would only make things harder. For me, for her, and possibly for our son too. So, after a lot of thinking and reading every comment from people who supported me online, we decided to act. We wrote her a message on Instagram, kept it calm, respectful, explained who I was and what I had just found out. Told her there was no pressure, just that I'd like the chance to connect. Then we waited. Days passed. A week. Then another. And finally, she replied. Her message was short, but heavy. She had confronted her mom, Amy, about everything. At first, Amy tried to deny it. But eventually, she came clean. My daughter now knew the truth. She was stunned, confused, but curious. She said she wanted to meet me. She didn't have the means to travel, and she had cut off contact with most of her family. So, we booked plane tickets and prepared to meet her face to face. This past weekend, I met my daughter for the first time. There's no way to put into words what that moment felt like. At first, it was awkward. How could it not be? But as soon as we sat down and started talking, something shifted. Despite everything she had been through, she greeted me with surprising grace. She's bright, thoughtful, grounded, and she didn't hesitate to say how betrayed she felt, not just by Amy, but by Carl as well. According to her, they never told her anything. They let her believe a lie for 20 years. She admitted that Amy initially tried to twist the story, but when pressed, finally admitted that I was her real father. And to my daughter's credit, she didn't let anger take over. She just wanted clarity. She wanted answers. And now that she had them, she wanted to start from there. She also said something I didn't expect. She had no intention of cutting Amy or Carl completely out of her life. Not yet, anyway. But she was going to set clear boundaries. She needed space from them while she figured out her own feelings. That, I respected deeply. Even more surprising was how well she got along with my wife and our son. They clicked almost immediately. It felt natural, like we had known each other longer than just one afternoon. Over dinner, she shared something else. My parents, her so-called grandparents, had stayed in touch with her this whole time. They never told her who I really was, but they were always unusually affectionate with her. Now she understood why. She was starting to piece everything together. And despite it all, she wanted to keep talking, keep seeing us, keep trying. After that first meeting, life felt both hopeful and fragile. My daughter and I kept in touch every day. The messages, video calls, and shared stories were my favorite moments. Watching her laugh reminded me of what I'd missed. Meanwhile, my parents and sister, once so insistent, had finally stopped bombarding me with emails and visits. They seemed to realize I wasn't going to forgive easily, and perhaps they also understood they'd lost their only chance to rebuild trust. Still, the lingering pain from their betrayal hadn't vanished. Some nights, I'd lie awake thinking about all those lost years. Birthday wishes unsent, milestones unseen, conversations never had. The ache was real, but it was tempered by something stronger, the joy of knowing my daughter was out there. At home, my wife remained my rock. She encouraged me to focus on this new relationship and to protect my emotional well-being. She reminded me that while I couldn't change the past, I could shape the future. That's a lesson I held on to tightly. My daughter began sharing little details about herself, her major at college, her favorite books, her dreams for the future. Each revelation felt like a gift. I found myself planning trips, imagining holidays, even pondering the day I might finally call her daughter in front of my friends and colleagues. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, of wondering if we were moving too fast, if I was invading her world. But every time I hesitated, she'd send a message. "Thank you for reaching out, Dad." Those 2 words made everything worthwhile. Now, I'm stepping forward with cautious optimism. I'm building a bridge to my daughter, one conversation at a time. I'm learning to forgive myself for the years lost, and to trust that this new chapter can bring the closeness I always wanted. Just when things began settling into this new rhythm, the past came knocking again, loudly. Word somehow got back to my extended family that I had made contact with my daughter. And with that, the silence shattered. My uncle, the man whose influence started this entire mess, was furious. According to messages I received from distant relatives, he blamed my parents for letting me reconnect with her. Apparently, in his mind, the truth was a threat that should have stayed buried forever. It was absurd. What stunned me most was how quickly my parents caved. After saying they'd respect my space, they suddenly reached out again, pleading with me to clear the air. My father even begged me to tell my uncle that neither Carl nor he had anything to do with how I found out the truth. But I refused. Why should I protect the very people who robbed me of 20 years with my daughter? I told them that if anyone had a right to feel betrayed, it was me. That their fear of upsetting my uncle cost me something I'll never get back. The chance to be there for my child as she grew up. To this day, they still don't get it. They still want to believe that what they did was a tough but justifiable decision. But I see it for what it was, cowardice. All they cared about was keeping things smooth with the rest of the family. And now that their secrets are unraveling, they're desperate to keep the illusion alive. I'm not interested in helping them. The only people I care about right now are the ones who stood by me, and the daughter I finally got to meet. Last weekend, something happened that I'll never forget. My daughter flew in to spend time with us again. This time, it wasn't a first meeting. It wasn't awkward or uncertain. It was warm, familiar, like she was slowly becoming part of our world. We went to the zoo with my son, had lunch at my favorite restaurant, and spent the evening at home watching old movies. She and my wife laughed like they'd known each other for years. My son was completely smitten with her, asking 1,000 questions, showing her his drawings, even calling her sis by the end of the night. I didn't prompt any of it, and that's what made it so powerful. We ended the night sitting around the kitchen table. She looked at me, serious but calm, and said, "I don't know what the future holds, but I'm glad you found me." I almost broke down right there. After everything, after betrayal, abandonment, decades of lies, I was sitting across from my daughter, and she wanted to be here, with me, with us. That moment didn't erase the pain of the past, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. She's going back to school soon, and we're already planning when she'll visit next. There's still a long road ahead, full of emotions to unpack, but at least now, we're walking it together. And as for my parents, my uncle, and Carl, they're still trying to call, still sending messages, still hoping I'll change my mind. But I won't. Not because I'm bitter, not because I want revenge, but because I've finally built a life without their shadows, and I intend to protect it. It's been a few weeks since that visit, and while things are still far from perfect, there's something powerful in knowing the truth and finally choosing peace. My daughter and I continue to talk regularly. We're learning about each other in small ways. Favorite meals, memories, stories that would have been shared years ago but are only now coming to light. She's slowly opening up, and I'm doing my best not to overwhelm her. One step at a time. My wife, bless her, has remained a constant source of strength. She never once made me feel guilty about pursuing this relationship. She's welcomed my daughter not just into our home, but into our hearts. Our son now draws pictures of all four of us together. He calls them our family. That word used to carry a lot of pain for me, but now it carries hope. As for the people who betrayed me, my parents, Carl, Amy, my uncle, I've come to terms with something important. Closure doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it means accepting what happened, letting go of what you can't change, and choosing not to let it define your future. I haven't blocked them. I don't respond. Their words can't reach me anymore. I don't need their validation or their excuses. I have a new chapter now. One built on honesty, choice, and real love, not obligation or blood ties that were never honored. And in that space, I finally feel free. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you or made you think, please don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe. And turn on the notification bell so you never miss more powerful real-life stories just like this.